So, the timing of today's podcast is actually very strategic. I have been waiting to discuss this topic with you for a while now. In past years, I have, offered habit advice and setting goals advice and maintaining motivation type advice right around the beginning of the year, with the anticipation that you are probably creating resolutions and thinking about what you want for yourself and how you're going to create it. And so I have been right alongside, like at that time of year, to talk about how to help you attain it, right? And so, though, over the years, and as I have been reflecting around what is actually true and what would really be most meaningful and genuinely helpful to you, my dear listener, is really this observation that what often happens is that at the beginning of the year, with coaching clients, I talk to people who are ready. They're like, I'm making these changes and here's what's going on and here's what I'm going to do. And they're like gung ho. And I'm like, okay, go do it. And then they go forth and they make their best effort. And sometimes it totally works. Like, they have the skills, they have a realistic plan, they are following through, and it's all fine. And they're able to make those changes and achieve the goals that they set for themselves at the beginning of the year. And what is actually much more normal is to see a pattern where people go full steam into trying to create these changes, and then they have the typical experience, which is that they get, a week or two in, and they become aware that it's harder than they think it's going to be. And they find themselves not following through or not getting the results that they want and feeling discouraged and, abandoning their resolutions and their goals, sometimes even just a couple weeks into the year. And in my experience, this is because of a few different, fairly predictable reasons. One is that there's a skills gap, that thinking about creating change is much easier than actually doing it. And what often happens is that when people try and they move forward, they run into the fact that there are very specific, oftentimes internal skills that you need in order to be able to do what you would like to do. And until we can acquire those skills, it's very difficult to follow through. And until you have that experiment of like trying, you don't have that awareness of the skills gap. So that when we try something and then it doesn't kind of go, that is actually a beautiful moment, because then you can come back and ask yourself, okay, why? Why didn't that work? And then in a lot of ways, the real work can begin, where you start answering that question. And that can generate a lot of growth and ultimately lead to the change that you'd like. Another thing that I see is that people sometimes will run into trouble with achieving their goals when they have a kind of all or nothing mindset. Like there's this expectation, even a subconscious expectation, that they are going to move forward in a linear trajectory towards their ideal outcome. And it's like a binary thing. They either do it or they don't. And then when they don't, or they don't do it perfectly, there's like this, oh, well, never mind. It's sort of ruined, And I think along the same lines is what I was describing before. A much more helpful approach is what we call a growth mindset. There's a lot of research to support this. And this growth mindset is this basic orientation that we are learning. And that especially when we're trying things that feel new and difficult, there is, by definition, going to be this like on-ramp where we're practicing, we're trying things. Sometimes those things work, sometimes they don't. And that is always like just more data. It is more information that we can then use to adjust our process, learn about ourselves, and slowly over time achieve mastery that is sustainable and that becomes, again, over time, easier and like almost automatic, which is the goal, right? That we are being who we want to be without even having to think about it that much. So growth mindset and skills acquisition are extremely important. But there are also other things that go along with this. And really, ultimately, when we try something and it doesn't work out the way we want it to, it opens a door for this really rich opportunity for self-reflection, understanding ourselves, our values, our internal process, our feelings, our thoughts on a much deeper level. And too often I see people kind of closing that door, saying like, write failure across the front of that door, like tape it up with police tape, it's over. They walk away. And so that's why on today's episode, it's really an invitation to walk through that door and start thinking about this in a more ultimately helpful way. So that's the goal for today. And so to help us with this, I have actually invited a master life coach to join this conversation to share her tips and insights into the strategies that you can use to begin to understand yourself more deeply and put those pieces together and acquire those specific skills to be able to then move forward and create real and lasting change that will be yours to keep. So, Lori Gerber with Handle Group, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a real treat to talk with you.
It is a pleasure being here.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so excited that you're joining us today, and so for us to be talking about our topic at hand, because you're a very experienced coach, and you have a lot of insight into how people change and grow, and what are common obstacles, and how do we help people transform around those. And so I'm excited to talk about this with you today. But maybe just to start, why don't you just introduce yourself to my listeners so they know who you are and what you're about? I mean, you're kind of a big deal.
One of the ways I like to describe myself is I am a personal growth junkie, and I always have been. I come from that in my lineage of people who seek and want to learn and want to grow and want to develop themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But the unfortunate, sad part of my story was that even after having started Tai Chi, meditation, yoga, chanting at the age of around 11, lived in an ashram when I was 20, therapy, all kinds of courses, books, gurus, you name it, I did not have my life together. It looked very good on paper.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 little kids. I had a cute husband. I was only a size 12, which was pretty normal in my family, though I was miserable and didn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, everything looked pretty good to the outside world, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, given I was size 12 and everyone was size 12 in my family, that seemed normal to me and to others. I had the great career. I could work from home. I had 2 little kids. I had a husband. I had a home in New York City. Just all of the real things that people say they want in order to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I do credit a lot of that personal growth with those accomplishments. I wasn't actually happy.
Yeah.
And I look over at my friend Lauren Handel-Zander. She's the one who invented the Handel method. And we had done a lot of our personal growth together. We were in a women's group together. And she looked effing happy. And I said obnoxiously happy. That's what I called it. And so I thought there were some dots that didn't get connected. And I wanted to know what that was. So I hired her as a coach. So indelible change, to your point, indelible change first in body and health, relationship to self, then saved my marriage, then started to deal with my career. And it didn't take long in the career conversation. I mean, first she had me do great in the business that I was in and figure out what was off there and resolve all that and leave that in a beautiful way. But then it was clear I needed to figure out what I really wanted to do that was going to really fulfill me. And I just looked over at her and I said, I mean, I remember actually saying, life coach, that sounds like a quack. I would be embarrassed to tell anybody I do that.
Mm-hmm.
But then in parentheses, and this was 15 years ago, right? Life coaching was a little bit different then. But then I wrote in parentheses, but if I could do what you do, I'd probably be pretty happy. And then I kind of ignored it because I didn't think I could. And then a month or 2 later, miraculously, the person who was running her life coaching division left unexpectedly.
Mm-hmm.
They literally needed somebody to take over that part of the business. I had been running a small business anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I slipped right on in to getting to not only help grow this amazing company that I loved the mission of, but also to be able to be a coach and to work one-on-one with people and with couples and with groups and weekend retreats and on TV and on the radio and all the different ways I got to teach this thing that helped me so much. And I just won't shut up about it, because the more I get to talk about it, the more I have to keep using it. It's very selfish. But it's selfish to keep talking about it, but it also just makes me so happy when I see somebody change their mind permanently and change their action permanently and get a different result. So
that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing your story. It sounds like it was just a very meaningful experience for you. And then through the course of that, realizing that it would be very meaningful for you to be of service in the lives of others. And I have to tell you, when you were talking about like being 11 and like all this stuff, I just want you to know, I can so relate. My mom was like a self-help / new age junkie. When I was in elementary school, she had this bookcase. I can still visualize it. It was this huge bookcase, and it had Tony Robbins, Dale Carnegie, all kinds of sun signs. Exactly. There's a reason why we are the way we are. So
don't fall far from
David Viscott. Do you remember that one?
My mother was more on the spiritual side.
We had those too.
Practical philosophy, The Road Less Traveled, Pema Chodron.
Road Less Traveled, yeah.
Kripalu, a little more of the agey.
Yes.
Less of the go.
I know more than I should about the metaphysical properties of crystals, because we're there.
You're my tribe.
So now that we have
generation.
Right. Now that we have that out of the way. Too funny. Well, I'm so glad. And the reason why I was really excited to speak with you today specifically, and at this time, is because at this time of year, we are talking, late January, beginning of February. And what I have seen over the years is that people get really excited around the change of the year about setting goals and making resolutions and like these big plans. You go to the gym on January 5th and it's like wall-to-wall people. You have like 4 people deep waiting for the machine. But by the time we get to like the end of January, beginning of February, it's like crickets chirping. There's like, spider webs.
We're licking our wounds.
Right, exactly. And
I shouldn't have said that to begin with.
I know, but you like that. It's such like a common, normal thing. And what I've found is that this is when the work begins, right? It's when you try to do something and then run into an obstacle, either an internal obstacle or an external obstacle. And it's from those experiences, like it is not a failure, but it's like this growth moment around, okay, this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be.
Right.
And so that's what we're talking about today is like really kind of diving into what that is about.
What's up with that?
What is going on? And how do people get back on track in a more ultimately productive way?
So one of the main principles of the Handel method, I think, that is so powerful is personal integrity. Different from courses I had taken, which talk about integrity, right? Like as a moral or an ethical principle. Personal integrity has to do with living true to your own highest ideals, where your actions line up with your thinking and your planning, line up with your highest ideals, not your middle
values. Your ultimate self.
Right. Like that's kind of why when I came to coaching, though I had lined up head and body quite a bit, I produced a lot of results, it wasn't connected with my highest ideals. Really, like glaringly not connected to my highest ideals. And Lauren called that personal integrity. Like all 3 in a row, not just looking good or doing right or checking boxes or getting it done or all of that, what I would consider to be physical integrity. So what happens in the new year is people go, I'm going to do this physical integrity, right? I'm going to do this thing differently. I'm not going to eat sugar, or I'm going to work out every day, or I'm going to meditate, or I'm going to do this physical thing. And because we are not looking at the emotional and spiritual integrity that underlies the physical, the roots just aren't deep, right? It's
Yeah.
like the wolf can huff and puff and blow your house down
Hmm.
because it's not brick and it's not rooted.
Yeah, got it. That it's not really grounded in this fundamental understanding of who you are, what you need. And I'm so glad to hear you talking about this, because this is, what we have done is really like spending a lot of time going into the evidence and the research basis around coaching and the principles of psychology and what works and what doesn't. And I think a lot of coaches kind of like gloss over that piece, that there's, if you're motivated and you know what you want, just do XYZ and then you do it. And if somebody can't or doesn't, then it's, well, that you weren't motivated enough. And I'm so gratified to hear you saying that no, that's an invitation to dig deeper.
Well put.
Yeah.
And I do even think there were three, maybe four critical factors to
Mm-hmm.
why this method changed me indelibly
Yeah.
and the other ones didn't. Specifically, it
Mm-hmm.
was very much like a New Year's. I had been making many New Year's resolutions, but I had not been altering my consciousness.
Yes, exactly.
And despite so many hours,
Mm-hmm.
and such earnest desire.
Yeah.
Um, so there really were some critical differences in what I had to look at
Mm-hmm.
that shifted that. And I can talk about that more if you want me to.
Wonderful. Yeah, I would love to hear more about your experience, and also, that what we know from the research, from the coaching practice around, for the benefit of our listeners, if you have experienced that um, stumbling block, or
Sure.
that it it hasn't been as easy to make
Yeah.
that change. Where do you really need to go next on that quest to dig deeper,
Great
so
question.
that you can then move on and create the reality that you'd like?
Yeah, I think that stumbling block happens at the heart level, the head level, and the body level, to
Yeah.
that point of all three.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing was the heart level, where one of the things that the Handel method forced me to do was articulate my dream or my vision.
Yeah.
And weirdly, even though I had been through all those other personal growths, I had never
Mm-hmm.
been challenged to answer what's a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 for you a year from now. Pretend you have time to get there in every area of your life.
Yeah.
There were certain areas I was not even I was not dealing with my body. That was not on the table. I was not
Mm-hmm.
interested. I did not come to coaching for that. I was not dealing with my sex life. I was
Mm-hmm.
not really even dealing with my love life until my husband started to flirt with my assistant.
Oh,
I
that'll
was
get
like,
your
oh,
attention.
that got my attention.
Yeah.
Consequences seem to get a human being's attention. I was willing to deal with my career. I was willing to look at my ability to, achieve what I considered to be success.
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly enough, that was for ransom. It was almost like that. I really couldn't even quite get there till I dealt with my relationship to myself,
Mm-hmm.
to my food, which was my one true love,
Mm.
my husband, if you know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying, and reconnect myself to my husband and my family, which was my foundation. So I
Yeah.
had to, even coming up with the dream, like what do I want, was it felt uncomfortable and new and different.
Mm-hmm.
And then she wouldn't let me stop until it was actually goosebumpy. Like, oh, I want to deeply connect with my husband. Oh God, I didn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have long walks on the beach. That cliche, that's me.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to love my body. I want to feel free. I want to feel open. I want to feel graceful. I want to feel like I can dance. I want to have sensual pleasure. What?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think that since I was 11. Like, I didn't have thoughts like that. I was just surviving and thinking and working hard and studying and parenting. And
Yeah.
I was like a milk cow.
Right. Oh no, I hear you. I hear you. But that's really like at the heart of that really meaningful coaching process, is that it's such a different experience that, like, my New Year's resolution is to lose 10 pounds kind of thing, which is like dry and crumbly, versus what you're describing is really that invitation to like, what excites you? What do you want? And like for your whole life, not just this one little slice of you, because you're this whole person, and really like getting you back into contact with that energizing, motivating, like exciting energy. That's cool.
Right. And she knew something I didn't. She really, really understood how much, literally how I was using my hand, right? Like literally the food I was putting in my mouth, the drinking, the nail biting, the like literally how we use our hands and our mouth, right? That if I could actually become the author of that, like if I could actually go, oh, I'm in charge of this and this, that everything would change and a cascade from there, which again, no one ever was going to tell me to deal with my addiction to sugar. That was like a blog I could read, but no one was ever going to go, Lori, as long as you're addicted to sugar and you don't think you control what you put in your mouth and you don't love yourself and your body and you have no connection to nature and earth and God and sustenance, good luck with everything else. Yeah. No one was ever going to say that to me. They wouldn't dare. That's a taboo topic. You can't even tell a woman how to eat. And I was I pulled feminist. Like, don't tell me how to eat. Don't tell me what my body should look like. And she's like, it's not about your body. It's not about it's about your relationship to yourself and what's in charge.
Yeah, completely. And, I'm thinking right now, I had the amazing opportunity to speak with a really inspiring woman who's doing very cool stuff in the field of like substance abuse recovery, actually, but her name is Jennifer Nicolaisen. And she's talking and it's developed this whole method around like the fact that we can become bonded to many things. Like we're built to bond to people, but like that's sort of what I'm hearing in your story, like this recognition that you became bonded to like food and sugar and the way that made you feel instead of what was really your heart's desire, this more relational aspect. And it's powerful stuff.
And I even remember, how it doesn't take very long to break an addiction, but I remember in those first week or 2 weeks, I remember I only had to call my coach one time. Like it wasn't, I would like to say it was very dramatic and hard and whatever, but it was actually okay. I was very proud to be breaking up with sugar. But I do remember that one time I called and I was like, I feel like I'm losing my best friend. That's the feeling in my heart. Like my heart is breaking that I cannot go to this right now.
Isn't that like that you connected with like sadness and grief around that loss? That is like.
And then it was like, well, wait a second.
This is
maybe
sugar.
Tastes great and getting laid would be good. That might actually really nourish you.
Yeah.
Which again was just not even on my radar.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the first part that blew my mind, was the connecting me to my own heart and my own truth about what's important.
So that, for somebody listening to this, then the takeaway is to consider the possibility that if, your resolutions haven't come to pass, that it's really an invitation to dig deeper and to take a look at who you really are, what you really want, and how are those needs currently being met by that old way of being, like eating sugar, that is not actually in alignment with who you are, and that self-discovery piece to help open up more options.
And I often ask, why do you care? So first I'm asking not just, do you want to lose 10 pounds? That's kind of like the result, but how do you want to feel? How do you want to show up? How do you want to be? What do you want it to look like? And then, a year from now, right? A stretch, but doable. And then why? Why do you care? Because it can be boring or generic and uninspiring unless you keep asking yourself, why do you care? Why do you care? Why do you care? Until you say something interesting. Because you're going to need that anchor, because then your head's going to start arguing. Because the minute I anchored myself to that dream, everything that was inconsistent with it was like, right? The minute I anchored myself to I want intimacy with my husband, I noticed him flirting with my assistant. I was like, uh-oh, this is not consistent. You know, so you need that anchor because you're about to then go to war with your head.
Yeah.
That's got a lot of mishigas, to put it in my culture's language.
I don't know what mishigas is. What is that?
Mishigas is Yiddish for cockamamie.
I'm Belgian. What is it? Cockamamie. That I know. Okay.
You know, cockamamie might also be Yiddish. For you know, head noise, mental chatter, negative inner dialogue. A lot of negative inner dialogue of the flavor chicken, brat, and weather reporter. That's what we named those voices that and they're fun, right? Like I literally did not understand the extent to which I was criticizing and undermining my employee and my work. I was business partners with my brother, had one employee. We were in a plateau. I was utterly critical and undermining of this person and had no idea that it was all a cover for my own fear and my own chicken when it regarded to building the business.
Yeah.
Right? I wanted to take all the attention off my own fear of building the business and put all my attention on criticizing her, and everyone fell for it, including me, including her, including my brother. And well, I guess the economy is just bad. No, the economy was not just bad. I personally organized and orchestrated everyone's attention on this over here to ignore the chicken and the brat, right? The brat didn't want to make calls and talk to people about my business, and the chicken didn't want to make calls and talk to people about my business. And the weather reporter was like, it's her fault. She's new here. She doesn't know the ropes. She doesn't know how to do it. Meanwhile, I had promised to do business development. I had promised to do that, but I was too busy. I was too busy training her.
Right. So I think what I'm hearing in here is that that through your work, you became aware that you know, kind of going back to that research piece, like we know that people have explicit goals, like things that they're conscious of, but also, you know, what's called implicit goals, that goals that are being actively pursued, but that are outside of our consciousness sometimes. And so that you became aware that those core goals were goals around helping yourself feel better by maybe displacing blame, that you were also kind of protecting yourself through some of the ways that you were handling those relationships, and that those were actually the goals that were being pursued.
I would call it hiding and lying.
Hiding and lying. That's fine.
I like how but yeah, I was hiding, lying, creating diversion to be able to stay comfortable and small. When actually my dream is not to be small. And I still battle. Like I still have this dark side, light side battle of, am I going to let myself be big, or am I going to stay a little baby, afraid, and blaming everyone else for my fear, and bratty, and blaming everyone else for why I don't have time or don't feel like it or shouldn't have to, or weather report, like, well, the world's just not ready, or, you know, I'm just not ready.
Yeah.
It's not true. It's fiction. Everything we think is fiction. Right. It's all fiction. And then we believe it, and we believe it enough, and we collect subjective evidence to prove our theories true and rule out evidence against. And then it really is true, according to us. Like, it really was true to me that my husband was incapable of intimacy, right? Like, that was true for me. So,
and I just want to say that is not just you. Like, I think I cannot think of a couple that I've ever started marriage counseling with where both people were not firmly convinced that the cause of all problems in the relationship was because the other person needed to change or had some like character flaw. I mean, like, so that's not a worry thing. That's like,
thank you.
I mean, really, like,
I knew I was normal.
You're normal.
I knew it. It's pesky humans. I really think that the special sauce is to be able to laugh at it, poke fun at it, lighten up about how creepy we can be, how easily we can just go, he did it, you know, when we're like, I'm innocent.
So it's just, it sounds like, I mean, it just really launched this process that is what, you know, we walk clients through, which is like this self-reflection. And I'm hearing in your story, like this really like courageous, like brave decision to like take ownership of your your truth. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? In
I
a new
do.
way. And it sounds like, I mean, and I don't want to certainly oversimplify it, but I mean, would you say that that was kind of the shift for you, was going into that, like, oh yeah, this is actually what I'm really doing?
Yeah, I would
Mm-hmm.
say with each of those areas, body,
Mm-hmm.
career, love,
Yeah.
there was this moment where I could see first where I was out of alignment between my ideal and my reality and my actions
Yeah.
and my beliefs even. Right? My belief, my ideal is deep intimacy, but my belief is my husband's not capable of it. Or my ideal is, graceful yoga, dancing, but my belief is that that is not a body I can have.
Yeah.
Or my ideal is to be rock and rolling in my business and growing
Mm-hmm.
it like, easily. But my thought is, I don't have time for that. So my
Right.
thoughts were incongruent with my feelings. And so I
Yeah.
remember I think in each case where I had that moment of truth where I could go, oh, I'm keeping this thought pattern on purpose. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to deal, but I could pick this thought pattern. And that's why it was so jarring to see Lauren, because
Mm-hmm.
she saw no conflict between a great family life and a great career. She saw
Mm-hmm.
no conflict between loving food and being healthy.
Yeah.
So her thoughts, she chose her thoughts. She
Mm-hmm.
curated and chose and then kept
Yeah.
reclaiming certain thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And I I didn't know I could do that. So
I
then
think,
I
yeah.
changed my thought. I said, "Oh, it's me. I'm not taking the actions in my business. I'm not listening to my husband. I'm actually not listening to him. I'm addicted to sugar. Holy crap." So there was this moment of choice where I wanted to go back, but because I
Yeah.
had the accountability of a coach,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go back because boy, I would have gotten fired, quite honestly.
That's amazing. I mean, but you know that there's so much power to recognize. I think that when the awareness that you have self-limiting core beliefs, and that you have the power to shift them. And I mean, I know that there are broad applications here in coaching, but really, you're also describing the heart and soul of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like the
Yeah,
gold standard for
yeah,
really helping people feel differently and shift their behavior and change their lives in real and, I mean, amazing ways, is by that realization that I can choose what I am telling myself, what I allow into my mind, and just like that sense of control and ownership around, I I can choose this. And what I choose makes such a big impact in the way I feel and what I do. And I could totally see, in hearing your story, how that was just like this incredibly energizing experience for
yeah,
you.
yes.
Yeah.
It's I wish it for everyone, and I wish it for
Oh,
myself
yeah.
continually.
Mm-hmm.
And also to be surrounded by, part of why we created Inner You, which is our community, is because you want to be surrounded by people who don't believe you if
Yeah.
you're saying something that isn't consistent with what you wish.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I get to experience working here, is that nobody believes me when I say it's the economy, or I can't, or I don't know how,
Yeah.
or whatever I come up with, because I'm very
Mm-hmm.
creative. And that's what we want. We want people around, and that's not what we would do normally. In fact, it's quite normal, and it was my experience that I would surround myself with people who didn't think I could, right? Who actually
Oh.
agreed that this was the body type, and agreed that sex dies after marriage, and agreed that the economy was bad. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't go seek out. And that's why I wanted that coach so badly, and
Yeah.
why I thought that coach was so powerful to have at that
Mm-hmm.
moment. And I was ready to hear that. And I wanted to hear, and I needed that. I needed a very direct voice. I
Mm-hmm.
needed somebody to be like, you're actually not thinking right.
Mm-hmm.
Don't
Yeah.
think that, think this.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it worked. And then parts 3 and 4 were about how to physically ground that into reality.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're ready to make and keep a promise, but not just
Mm-hmm.
because it's the new year.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've had a revelation that you have a dream, it's not going anywhere, and you're the one in charge of seeing it through. And you've done it before, you can do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can go make a promise, and it better be a promise, not a resolution,
Mm-hmm.
because resolutions are, you know, a cliche we all even laugh at.
Right.
So it really needs to be a promise, like
Mm-hmm.
what you would say to your child's teacher. I
Mm-hmm.
promise to pick him up at 3 o'clock. Or
Mm-hmm.
what you would say to your girlfriend, I'll watch your kids later. You know, like at least that much
Yeah.
self-respect
Yeah.
to honor it as much as you would honor something you promise your boss, your
Mm-hmm.
coworkers, your landlord, your kid.
Mm-hmm.
That's that third juicy difference. No one ever made me make the right promises.
Mm-hmm.
I even could make the
Yeah.
promise to drink water, but that wasn't the promise I needed.
Right. Well, I mean, and there's so much to unpack here, but maybe we could even talk more about that, because I love the way that you're framing this as like a promise that is this like commitment that you are making to another person, that if you don't follow through, it damages the relationship. Like they don't trust you if you like bail on your friend that you said you were going to babysit for. I mean, like, there are reasons why we don't do that. And yet, like, when I think of a lot of people, for some reason, it is easy to break those promises that we make to ourselves
Right.
sometimes. Why do you think that is?
And you don't realize actually that it's eroding your self-trust.
Yeah.
Just as it would erode your trust with a friend,
Yeah.
it's eroding your self-trust, but we're so used to it. And then we anesthetize it with drinking or Instagram or television or food or our children, right?
Yeah.
We anesthetize ourselves from that feeling of dissonance. So
No, I get that. And kind of going back to that, the core beliefs that we carry, you do that enough times, and there's this core belief around, I cannot
right.
actually make
And
change because,
you
as evidenced by, yeah,
right.
these
And
experiences that I have.
the minute you turn that around and you say, I got myself here, I can get myself out. It's like if you see a knot in your earbuds, you can unravel it because you got it in the knot.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to cut it. It's yours. Right? So, but we don't tell ourselves that because the chicken and the brat want to win and keep us on the couch and keep us where we are, surviving our lives. So finding the right promise that's a stretch but doable, that is the one that would really cut through, that was a major advantage of having a coach, and then being accountable to the coach, not just to myself, helped me go, oh, right, I can do this.
Yeah.
And then the real special sauce was this thing we call consequences, which, as we all know, consequences occur naturally in life for everything. There's a consequence if you drink water. There's a consequence if you don't drink water. There's a consequence if you eat sugar. There's a consequence if you don't. There's a consequence if you listen to your husband. If you don't listen to, all of my choices had consequences. But the nature, and I'm sure you'll explain this scientifically, but the nature of the human brain is that we are not conscious of the connection between the choice that I'm making right now and that consequence. So I was not conscious of the connection between not listening to my husband's talking and his desiring to connect with my assistant. I was not conscious. I was literally not even conscious of the connection between eating sugar at every meal and feeling like crap, sleeping like crap, having bad skin, and low self-respect. I didn't make the connection between those things. I did not make the connection between our business plateauing and me not taking business development actions, which sounds absurd, right? Like, how could I miss it?
But it's really not, though, and I think that that's the human default. Is that I think that we're all kind of primed and wired that we experience a consequence as adversity. But I think that there's something about the idea that, oh, I actually am contributing to this, that can feel very threatening at first. It is much more, I don't know, gratifying to blame your husband for being a jerk, or blame
at least short term. Short term,
but that it's. I mean, I see this with my clients is, sometimes the idea that I float is, I wonder, what would happen if we did this a little differently. I've worked with some people who are like, almost offended at first with this idea that they could be inadvertently creating their own reality. It's a tough one. Was it hard for you? I mean, like, what was it like for you when you were first like, oh, I'm actually not listening to my husband, and therefore this is happening in my relationship? Did you have that moment of you're like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
But there were two good things about my situation. One was that I was ready
mm-hmm.
to change because I had tried so many things and not succeeded at the change
Yeah,
I wanted. So I was ready to change. And then I saw proof that change was possible.
mm-hmm.
So those two things got me motivated, to use your
Yeah,
word. And
yeah,
then, but in that moment, and I'll tell you the story if you want to know it,
sure,
because what Lauren had me do was go read my dream to my husband and ask him why we didn't have it. Very simple exercise of, since your theory that it's because he's a dumb jock is not accurate, is not the truth. I know that much. I know that's not true. Let's go find out what the real answer is.
yeah,
And so I sat him down. I put on my most, graceful consciousness
mm-hmm.
and really asked him to tell me his truth.
Yeah,
And it took some coaxing, but he explained that he only ever gets 3 sentences out before I interrupt him, take it on my own path, put my anxiety on him. He stopped trying to talk to me years ago.
oh,
And that was that moment of truth where I go, oh, that's
wow.
very bad news.
Well, I mean, but the
It's
fact
also
that he
very
told
good
you
news.
that is like,
Yes.
because the really bad thing is when, you know, that people don't actually say that out loud. I mean,
That was worth every
Mm.
penny, that one moment.
Yeah,
And I wanted to turn back and be like, but I'm a New
you're wrong.
Yorker and I'll forget if I don't, like, no.
Right.
I said love, honor, and cherish.
Mm-hmm.
That means listen to a whole story. I don't
Yeah.
care if his culture is different than yours or he tells the point at the end and you want the point at the beginning. That is not what love is. Love is being there for someone, and you've never even done that. You don't even know what it's like, right? Just like I didn't know what it was like to eat fruits and vegetables and a meal with no sugar in it.
Yeah.
So that was that moment of truth, like you said, where I wanted to justify and run, but I knew, because I knew I was going to have to answer to this coach, that I needed to just go in, and then the reward that moment later, if you don't defend yourself, that reward that you get, where the person goes, but I forgive you, and then you go, I'm going to stop interrupting you, and then I've practiced that as a promise, not an intention, not a goal, I do not interrupt my husband. And when I do one of his chores. And I do one of his chores for a couple reasons. One, because I don't like to, and that keeps me conscious. It keeps me deterred from situations and behaviors that lead to interrupting. And because it is a recompense, a kind way to say, I really am sorry. I owe you something. I just withdrew from the bank and now I'm putting some money back in.
Yeah.
To make it right, to put my integrity back.
That's great.
And that's such a good feeling.
Yeah. And I bet it's really good for him too. I mean, that you're showing him through your behaviors that you're taking that promise seriously. And I also just want to acknowledge, I mean, how much courage and also how difficult it is to really like be connected with someone and listening for the purpose of understanding and with empathy for their experience, and that you really created what sounds like a very healing moment when he had a totally new experience of you. And you were able to start a new chapter.
It changed everything for me,
wonderful.
For him, and for us.
And
the alternative, divorce, right?
Oh, yeah.
Divorce, cheating. I mean, it was pretty clear, the alternative. So I chose, and yes, I was courageous, but I also was very crystal clear on the actual consequences that were going to unfold if I didn't learn something new.
But again, it's, I mean, just like going back to your self-awareness, because like, I think that unfortunately, a lot of people who aren't privy to this type of information. And so I think people who do your coaching program or who listen to this podcast, like, they're seekers, they're learning. And so, are onboarding these ideas that there is more going on and that they do have control. But I think a lot of people really feel victimized and helpless in their relationships. And you didn't, and you changed it. That is wonderful. So, and I know we're starting to come up on the end of our time here, Lori, but so for listeners here, to be able to apply these ideas that we're talking about to their own lives. I mean, so there's somebody who's tried to achieve something, it feels like it's gone off track. If I can kind of condense what you share, that step one is really doing some deep diving into your true feelings and getting your mind and your body and your heart in alignment so that your goals and your actions are all congruent, that you're not at kind of odds with yourself in some ways. And then the next step of that is also just really keeping that awareness of what is really happening in your consciousness. Like if you identify that you have self-limiting beliefs, really come into that empowered stance of, no, I don't have to, and kind of take control over your internal environment in some ways, and recognize those unhelpful voices and kind of curate that experience.
Parse and name and curate. Parse, name, and curate.
Okay. And then when you have that clarity about, that congruence, and you have that sense of control over what's happening in your mind, and then you can come into a place where you're able to take really meaningful action, making those promises to yourself from a place of, this energizing, motivating, but also effective energy because of that pre-work that you've done.
Exactly.
Does that kind of capture what you've shared?
And the only thing I want to emphasize is the fourth thing that Lauren did that none of these other modalities had, not even close, was to back it all up, like the insurance policy, like AAA for your car, this artificial annoying consequence.
Right.
Artificial annoying immediate consequence.
Yeah.
Made me bionically intelligent about actually designing my life so I could keep the promises.
I love it.
If you just wait and see, are you going to go to the gym? Good luck. But if you're going to lose your wine on the weekend, if you don't go to the gym, all of a sudden you're putting it in your calendar. You're asking your friend to go with you. You're getting a trainer. You're just, your mentality is totally different because you have an immediate annoying consequence talking to you instead of this amorphous, life kind of sucks. I kind of suck. Everything kind of sucks. No, I just want to avoid losing my wine on the weekend, or I want to avoid losing my coffee tomorrow. I want to avoid doing my husband's chores. I have my own chores.
I love it. That's such a great takeaway, finding an immediate annoying consequence, because really so many of these things, like these habit goals or the behaviors that carry us from point A to point Z, is that the ultimate reward is very far in the future of having health or fitness or more energy or a better relationship. I mean, that's like more money in the bank years out, but to make it immediate.
We can't fantastic. We can neither feel the reward nor the consequence. So we're just weather reporting. It's just hot in August. I'm just bad at keeping a schedule. I'm just bad at going to sleep on time. I'm just bad at managing my money, right? As though it's anything other than your moment to moment choices. As soon as you go, if I don't, I'll lose my wine on the weekend, or my Instagram on the weekend, or I have to babysit my brother's kids.
It makes it real.
You do that, you're like, oh, my choice will matter. It matters if I stay at this party tonight. It matters if I do or don't say that thing to my husband. It matters that you are alert and present to consequences, which are more motivating than rewards for almost every human being. And you're able to design your life better to keep that promise. And then you keep the promise, and then you can vote whether it's the right promise or not. Right? One of the things is I would keep a water promise, but it didn't get me the body and health and vitality I wanted. So yay, I could keep it, but I needed a different promise. And the promise that you need changes over time, depending on what your dream is, depending on your whatever you're focused on. and
Yeah.
what you're really paying attention to. So
We're
it's not
always
like you're
evolving.
stuck with one promise for the rest of your
Yeah.
life, though I really still like mine. I'm still really working. But I've redesigned my relationship to sugar, where I can have some, under certain
Sure.
conditions. And so I have visits with my old love. What do you call it? Like chaperone visits.
That's hilarious. That's awesome, though. Well, Lori Gerber, thank you so much for visiting with me today. This has been such a fun conversation, and I really appreciate just all the really helpful things that you've shared with my listeners today, just to kind of help people get under the hood and get some
Yeah.
hopefully really meaningful strategies to get back on track and create real and lasting change. This is wonderful.
You are so very welcome. Thank you for making it such a pleasure to share.
Thank you.